Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. It's your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in our hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd product guy at Data.World, joined by co host Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Hey, Tim, how are you doing? Always, it is a pleasure to take a break in your day, take a break in the middle of the week, and just have our conversations about data. And today, I'm super excited to finally have us on the podcast Nicola Askham, who's the data governance coach. I was looking up our LinkedIn messages, and I think I reached out to you probably 2 years ago, I think, to be on the podcast. But then finally, we were on a panel like a couple of weeks ago or something. And I feel that we kind of really had this great kind of going back and forth and like, yes, we got to do this. So, Nicola, it is great to finally have you here on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. Well, hey, we always kick it off with our telling toast. And again, with our honest no BS, this is a pre-recorded episode. Life is very different as when we started the podcast where everything was live. But now we have to record. So it's morning here in Austin. I'm having coffee, but what are we drinking? What are we toasting for? And what is your favorite drink? And let's talk a little bit about your drinks and cocktails or mocktails.
Drinks. Oh, probably more cocktails than mocktails. Sounds a terrible thing to say. Probably a nice gin and tonic. There's so many good gins around these days. I do enjoy a gin and tonic. But other than that, just wine is fine as well. And for now, it's tea. It's very English.
Right now it's coffee for me, and it is a little early in the U.S. here, but on the cocktail front, I got a bottle of rum lately that has really strong flavor to it. Like I've never had a rum this strong, and I actually can't remember the name of it, so I'll have to remember in one of our subsequent episodes and tell our audience here. But I needed a cocktail to really kind of mute the flavor of the rum because I don't like a really strong rum flavor. So I have a lemon rum cocktail I've been making with it that's actually quite good. And likewise, Nicola, it's mostly cocktails, not mocktails for me.
Well, actually, I had recently, so people have been listening. I had a lot of cocktails with Aperol, mixing them. And then I'm like, yesterday I had a cocktail with ginger beer. I'm like, that's a reminder that I need to go experiment more cocktails with ginger beer. Like it gives me that little fuzzy kind of really punch flavor. So I'm going to start doing that one and figure out hopefully for our next episode, we'll have that. But all right. We have a warm-up question. So the title of today is Stop Talking About Data Governance and Just Start Doing It. So what is something that we talk about and we don't do, but we should start doing it?
For me, obviously, data governance would be the obvious answer. But I think personally, I love yoga, but I'm not very good at doing more intensive exercise than that. And I keep talking about the fact I'm going to get on the exercise bike. I'm going to go out more, and life just seems to get in the way.
I think that's what happens. I mean, always think about like what's happening in New Year's Eve, right? New Year's resolution. People are like, going to go start to the gym. Or this spike. So, Tim, what's yours?
Similar to yours, Nicola, is I got a little, for those who are watching, I got a little piano over here. And I always tell myself, before I go to bed every evening, I'm going to practice for 10 or 15 minutes. But by the time it gets late, I'm like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. So that's the thing I keep talking about and don't do. I should do. What about you, Juan? You got something you're talking about, but you're not doing?
It's reading non-technical books. So, I am now actually starting, but listening, but which I kind of feel it's cheating, but I'm at the same time like very, very productive about doing that.
At least you're doing it, yeah, and you can multitask.
I'm starting to do that. I have the book Sophie's World, right? The book about philosophy, and so my 2-year-old, his name is Sophia, and so I've been reading that while putting her to sleep to see. And I'm actually getting into it. Like she falls asleep very quickly when I read that. So
she's not super into it.
But anyways, let's kick it off. Nicola, honest, no BS. Why is there so much talk about data governance and not enough doing?
I think my personal view would be that I don't think I've ever come across anybody in all the years I've been doing data governance that once you explain it to them doesn't say, oh, that's stupid, we shouldn't do it. Everybody agrees we should do data governance. But I think actually in practice, it's really hard, mainly because it's a people culture thing. And I think the name makes everybody think it's all about the data. And ultimately, we want to understand and manage our data better. We can only do that if the people come along and do the right thing. The data doesn't deliberately misbehave on its own. It doesn't mess itself up. It's usually what the people have or haven't done that cause the problems. And we've got to convince them that they want to do data governance, which is not an easy task.
So,
Maybe.
how are we overcoming that? Because I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all acknowledging, and this is something I'm seeing now more and more. This is probably in the last couple of years where it's really the talk about, it's a social technical thing, right? It's more of the people. But I would say 3-4 years ago, it wasn't that much it was much more technology. How are we overcoming this?
I think a lot of it's I've been trying to brief and train everybody at an organization that I've been doing data governance at for years. I didn't call it data literacy. I was just data culture, I suppose, or anything about you're a producer and a user of data, and we've all got to have some responsibilities. I didn't really label it as such, but I think there's been a lot of buzz the last few years about data literacy, and I think it is the very, very basic data literacy training, and I think it is this getting people to understand that data is an asset. I think in my experience, most people either don't think about their data, or if they do think about it, it's like the necessary evil that makes it harder for them to do their job because the report's never there on time. And when it is, it's got missing data or something. They don't think about this data thing as actually having value on its own. And I think that's what we've got to overcome and get people to realize it is an asset. And because it's an asset, we have to manage it the same way as we do everything else. We wouldn't walk past a hole in the office wall and just kind of move a picture over it to hope nobody notices it. We'd report it to the facilities or maintenance team. But that's kind of what we do with data. We just patch it up and hope nobody will notice.
Yes.
That's a fantastic analogy metaphor. Tim, you go, because you know me, I'll go down that deep hole.
It's a trap, Juan. Yeah. So, I mean, why are people not doing things around governance? Right. I think is my big question. Like, is it resources? Like, they're just not focusing people on it. Is it they don't have a strategy? Is it
lack of training?
They don't know where to start. What would you say is the biggest reasons why? Because I agree, people are like, I bet people who are listening right, now are saying like, yes, we have to do these things, and it's like, okay, well, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I've got other priorities right now, right?
Probably all of the things that you're saying. I think a big thing is the capability. I'm a great fan of people within the organization doing data governance. I am a consultant, but I'm not a fan of having a team of consultants come in and do it for you. Your organization needs to embrace this. So your organization is best placed to understand its data, its challenges, what you're going to do. But I think that also then means that, somebody could, suddenly go, oh, we need to do this data governance thing at our company. And, oh, Tim, you know a little bit about data, don't you? You do data governance. And if you hadn't ever heard the term before, you're going, whoa, what is this? And so I think a lot of people have the role dumped on them. And even if they go on training courses or they spend, hours and hours on Google, they go on and talk to somebody, and you meet Juan and say, Juan, I want to talk about data governance. And he goes, yeah, Tim, I know you've been at this company for years. You know nothing about data governance. Why should I do what you say? So I think it's this kind of, you get stuck in this catch-22. I think it's better done internally. But if it's done internally by somebody who's been in the company a long time, everybody knows that they don't know data governance. And if it sounds difficult, it's easy to go, no, I don't want to do this.
So hold on, but you started off saying you got dumped this data governance kind of function. Like, how did that start? Like, why are you seeing organizations saying, okay, now we need to go and do data governance, and like you're voluntold to go do that? How does
Tim,
that?
Can you take care of this?
Who came up with that idea? We got to go do data governance, and why did they choose?
Years ago when I was first doing data governance, it was all regulation driven. And it was financial services, and then some others followed suit. And therefore, whoever was responsible for monitoring the regulations, and often the compliance team or something, would say, oh, new regulation, somebody do this, and somebody would go, and there's always at least one person in the organization who moans about data. I was talking to a new CDO. I did a tiny piece of work for them a couple of months ago. And he's a university, come from academia and research, never really into data at all. But he's been moaning the last 2 years about the quality of the data and how it was affecting his research. So in the end, they went, you're moaning so much about it, you sort it. And I think that sometimes happens. It's people are understanding that it's something that's valuable to do now. And I think the people that have that first realization in the organization, if they're not senior, have to kind of this huge hurdle to even get the mandate to go and talk about data governance, to do it properly. So they might have the realization that we need this thing called data governance, but they've got to go and convince enough senior executives to even be allowed to go and do this. And then quite often it is that case, well, you want to do it, you better start. I was talking to some prospective clients earlier, and they're in the data analytics team. Huge consumers of data. That is quite a common one that I've seen notice the need for data governance. They've been telling their senior execs for about 4 years. But they keep saying, yeah, we'll do that. We'll get around to data, but something else always pips it to be top priority or in the top 3. But they've actually, they now think things have happened that will allow them to make the case again. But they're still stuck with this. They're trying to make the case for data governance for the sake of doing data governance. And I think that's where people make a mistake. We have to do data governance to deliver value, solve problems.
So this is an important, that's a good t-shirt quote, right? People do data governance for the sake of doing data governance, right? It's like, stop doing that. So let's take an example, right? You're saying that you have that data analytics team, but they're seeing the problems and they're like, well, the priorities aren't there to do governance. But hold on. Isn't there something small that you can already start doing that you can incorporate it to your day-to-day work that is already solving that problem, that you can consider it data governance, even though it's not like a big strategy or whatever, but it's already kind of starting there? Like, why do I sometimes feel that we just have to wait till the don't take this the wrong way, right? But all the consultants come in and will tell us that here's how data governance is. Like, no, I mean, some of this stuff has to be a little bit common sense. And like, why aren't we doing the common sense stuff?
I think you're right. It's common sense to us because we're data people. We get it. We understand. I think I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe the vast majority of people don't come to work to deliberately do a bad job. So they don't come to work to mess up their data and do it in the worst possible way. They do what they do with data because either they were told that and taught that when they joined, or it's just the obvious way to them to get a problem solved or something fixed. And they're not thinking bigger picture. So I think there are smaller things we could do, but I think without addressing that culture, they're tactical at best. And that's where you get people fixing data at the point they consume it and not going and solving the source of it. So that next month when I get the data, I have to do my cleansing and fixing all over again. And I have to say, some of the data was missing. And you say, oh, well, that comes from Tim. So I have to get in contact with Tim and say, Tim can have the missing data. And, several hours later, I can mesh it all together and go, oh, right, now I've got my data. And I think I fixed it. But I haven't said to you, could we fix this so we get it all in one report and it's not got duplicates or whatever in next month? And even if I did have the initiative to say that, you might go, well, it's just, this is how we do it. Or, and I think this is why we need the senior accountability, because we need somebody who's accountable for solving problems. And I actually, if I'm selling it to data runners, I don't say accountable, I say empowered, because quite often they're frustrated. Their teams are, messed around because the data isn't good enough, but nobody knows who's allowed to make a decision. So nobody does.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's well stated. You need senior accountability, and really empowered is an even better term. How much is the fact that governance is kind of manual a problem, and how important is the role of technology in helping address why people aren't doing data governance versus, on the other side of the spectrum, it's kind of irrelevant?
Yeah, so I think so good. Well, you probably is there on LinkedIn, but so I think when data governance tools first came around into being, I was probably quite vocal on LinkedIn saying you don't need data governance tools. You can do a lot with a good old Excel spreadsheet, and everything's great. And to be fair, you can, and I'd still recommend people start that way to get their head round what do they want in their data catalog rather than dive into. But I think so. It is about the people, and we need them to engage and start doing things, which is another reason I like to start manual. Because if you think about all the tools, I was a project manager, that's many years ago, that's how I got into data governance. But most times we put a new tool or a new system it's to either replace an old clunky tool that you're fed up with, or to automate a manual process, and both of which you're probably quite happy to engage with the project and talk to me because I'm going to solve a problem for you. And then this mad data governance woman comes along and says, right, you weren't doing this before, but I want you to do this, start documenting your data. And I want you to use this tool that I've selected without you being involved in tool because I know better. And you can see, people just go, whoa. So I found that it almost works best. Start doing data governance, start doing it manually, because now I'm solving the manual problem. And it makes it easier. But I do think that tools have a huge part to play. I think if you're a teeny tiny organization, probably not, sorry. But so many organizations are big. And even if they're not globally distributed, they're big enough that I don't know who else works here. You've now told me I've got to worry about this data, but how do I find out if we've got it, or who the data owner is, or who I'd ask questions about it? And I think that's when the tools can really facilitate and enable things. Once the people are ready to start doing it, I think the tools just solve everything and automate things and allow you to scale in a way that perhaps an Excel spreadsheet doesn't.
Yeah, no, I like the way that you're kind of explaining this, which is that, and maybe to say this in another way, I'm curious if you agree with this, is you're not buying, a data governance tool to do your data governance for you. You are looking to really change human behavior to accomplish what you need to have done around governance in order to manage your data better, to create more value, to meet regulatory frameworks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The many reasons why you do governance. And then technology is really about, okay, well, maybe you hit a scale factor or a complexity factor where now you need help.
Absolutely. And I think when you talk about global organizations, I've helped a number where, they've embraced data governance at head office, all is going well. And then they try to roll it out across, globally across the regions. And everybody goes, well, why? We don't even know the people sitting in their ivory tower at head office. And why would we join in? And I think this is where the tools can actually break those barriers down, make it easy for people to do it.
So I want to talk about how we start here. And if we can, let's talk about different types of organizations. So you already said, like, if you're a teeny tiny organization, probably you're going to do things in a very manual spreadsheet. So give us kind of ways to start that you've been seeing, and kind of the best practices depending on the types of organizations, and how are you seeing the success of starting?
So I think it always starts with, making the case for data governance. Even if your CEO comes back from some event and says, we should do data governance, you're never going to get far doing it. Even if the CEO has said so, you've got to work out what are the drivers in your organization. And I love doing conceptual data model workshops with each function in an organization, because I start getting an understanding of how they think about their data. During it, they tend to tell me their challenges, or what I tend to call their data quality horror stories. But I've got a wonderful friend, Niels Ledermart-Higgard, who I met when I first left the bank and became a consultant for the first time. And he was a much more experienced consultant. And he really took me under his wing and taught me loads of stuff. And he's got this technique that he calls his pain point analysis that he always uses to start data governance. And he did a fabulous blog on it recently. So I recorded a podcast with him on my podcast yesterday. That'll come out in a few weeks, because I love this idea of just if nobody wants to do, because not everybody wants to do a conceptual data model workshop just because Nicola says it's a really good thing, honest. I love the idea that Niels and can come around and say to you, look, I'm trying to solve problems for you, tell me what problems you've got, and then I can work out what I can solve for you. And I love that approach as well, because I think too many, I get really twitchy. I don't know what you two think when you see people on LinkedIn calling themselves a data governance evangelist. We mustn't evangelize about this. I did in the early days, and it doesn't work. People don't do data governance because I preach about it. They do about it because we're helping them. And so I love this idea of finding, always like having like counseling therapy sessions, isn't it? Tell me all your problems and I'll work out which ones are caused by data, and I'll try and solve some of them for you.
Yeah, not problem solver. Or I'm sorry, not evangelist, right? It's about being problem solver. Yep.
Much more practical.
I love that. Ooh, that's a hot take right there. So anybody who's listening, you have you're evangelizing data governance. Ding.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, so who is doing this work? Is this really like bringing in somebody like you, like another consultant, or who inside would be doing this type of work? Because by the way, everything you said, I fully agree with this, and this is something I push it. I enjoy doing this work. I enjoy having these conversations. I've talked about it, being that therapist and saying, "What is your problem? Why is that a problem? Go do." And then you have all these therapy sessions all over the place, and you're like, "Oh, I'm now connecting the dots," because you're taking that global view, and when you do the conceptual modeling, like, okay, you're using this term here and this term here, definitely using the same word, but you're meaning different things. So it's like, who should we actually be doing that work internally?
Yeah, so I think you can't get away from the fact that somebody has to be responsible for data governance. So I know some people say we can do it by stealth or whatever, but it's this kind of, I think somebody has to have the role of data governance lead, manager, whatever you want to call it. Because whilst absolutely we're trying to find business users to be the owners, the stewards, to actually tell us all this and start taking accountability for their data, they've never done this before. They need somebody supporting them and guiding them and probably driving it through. So I've never seen it being successful if there isn't somebody internally. And when I worked for the two consultancies, I came in, I was the consultant designing your data governance framework for you, finding your data owners, having all these conversations we were just talking about. But then sooner or later, the client would go, oh, well, the bigger, perhaps it was a CRM or an MDM program is going really well, but Nicola's really expensive as a data governance consultant. So that's going great. So we'll roll her off the project. And I think the best I had was 2 days to hand over to somebody who already had a day job. And the worst was 2 hours. Somebody senior just gone, oh, Tim, well, come here, meet Nicola. She's going to tell you everything she knows about the data governance she's done here. And my colleagues would be there telling me that it wasn't going so well. On one occasion, they actually called me back in to pick things up again and sort it out. So, and I think that's when I started getting the feeling that I know lots of consultants will probably shoot me down for saying this, but I don't think consultants should do data governance for you. And I would be lying if I said that I don't do consulting still, but I do very little of that. And I will only ever do it when I'm helping the person that's in the company, because you've got to have somebody that understands the organization, and you've got to have somebody that's taken it on board. So I think we do need somebody, but we've got to really make the case for it being a real job, not something that somebody's doing on top of their day job because they were the person who was in the line of sight when somebody agreed we needed to do data governance.
Yeah, I'm sensing a few best practices here, right? Like one is that, you can't just outsource data governance, right? You need to really take ownership, but people need to actually be focused on it, from senior kind of leader accountability to, specific folks who are actually doing the effort around governance. And then, that doesn't mean that consultants or advisors are not valuable. In fact, they're hugely valuable because they're able to bring their expertise and their experiences to your organization where you might not have as much within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen people, or I've helped people who have probably a bit like me made up data governance as they went along the first time. It's a bit easier these days. There's a lot online. There was nothing when I was doing it, but they perhaps do a reasonable job, and this is really great. And then they get headhunted and they go and join a new organization. And to be fair, I was a bit like this with the first consultancy job, going, suss this. Now I know how to do this. but the new organization, what you did before doesn't work because it's a different organization. It's got a different culture, different challenges. And they're really bewildered because they're kind of going, well, I've worked this out before. And I was exactly where I was all those years ago going, well, this worked before. Why is it not working here? And I think that's one of the reasons data governance is so hard to do, is that there is no one silver bullet of a framework that says, here's this framework, cut and paste this, copy and paste this, do it in your organization. It'll be fine, because it won't. It has to be tailored to your organization.
So I started off with the question, how do you start? And I really like how you're actually talking about things that you should not be doing. Like you said, how you highlighted consultants should not be the ones doing the governance. Yes, they can advise, but you can't outsource that, right? What worked in one organization for you may not work for the other one. So don't just think because you just did that, you can just basically lift and shift that, right? The copy paste the framework, that's probably not going to work, right? It needs to be tailored to the culture. What are the anti-patterns? What are the things that you've saying, do not do this, please?
Do not do. I don't like doing if you're doing data governance to meet regulatory requirements, I hate it when an organization says, what's the bare minimum we can do to meet the regulator? So it's like the tick box. If I can just do this, this, and this, then the regulator won't have a go at me and I can just carry on as normal. I think that I've never seen that work. Regulators always change their mind, and then you'll have to have a whole new project to go back and do it again. And if you do it properly, you'll get business value and keep the regulator off your back. So I think that's a do not do. I think, I suppose another do not is don't have unrealistic expectations about the timescales you can do it. You know, I've had people say, oh, we want this in 3 months on a prospect call. And I'm going, no. You'll still be designing your framework, getting people along for the ride and agreeing to do this with you at 3 months. You certainly won't have a data governance framework designed and embedded. I think, people make that mistake a lot.
How do you deal with that real quick? Like, do you just tell folks, just extend your timeline a little bit? Do you deal with that more in terms of just like, hey, stop thinking of this as a project, think of it as a program? How do you deal with that?
Well, that's another really good, excellent. Don't think of it as a project. But I think often the people who want it in ridiculously short timescales are thinking of it as a once and done project kind of thing. I think generally I do my best to influence them and explain that this isn't a project. Some people just don't want to listen. It's really difficult. I think, you can do your best. I would, if you're starting data governance now or trying to start, I would go to every webinar, listen to podcasts, go to conferences and events and listen to the stories of the people that are doing it so that you can share that. Like we said, we can't copy and paste, but those case studies, those real life experiences will help you articulate in your organization why we can't do this in 3 months. Because if nobody else has ever managed it, why would we manage it?
Let's talk about for a second about these frameworks. So I'm very curious. What is I mean, we agree that we don't want to copy and paste a framework, but I think a framework can give us some high level views. Like, okay, this is an approach or stuff like. What is Nicola's data governance framework, assuming that you have something that you'd like principles?
Yeah, so I don't have a framework because I think they exist, but they are theoretical exercises. They weren't designed for any particular organization. So, and I think that's why they don't work. So I think, like you said, I think they're good for inspiration. If you've never done this before, how are you supposed to know what they look like? So, but my approach is more just, I've kind of developed my own methodology and principles for doing data governance successfully over the years. And that's what kind of the basis of all the work I do and the training and coaching. But it's all about, takes you through the building blocks so that you do the right things or consider the right things so that you can build your own framework. And a lot of it is understanding why you're doing data governance. I think if you don't understand the drivers or what problems you're trying to solve, you won't design the right framework to deliver those. So if you don't know those up front, you're going to fail. I think the capability is a big one. People don't understand you know, that they think they can just, it'd be all right, we'll just make it up as we go along. It's not all right. I tried 3 times in the bank making it up as I went along. I learned lots of things that are very valuable now in telling people what not to do. I didn't actually get it right very often. Thing. So, why do all that? But then I think it's a case of looking at the organization, the structures of your organization, because you can take ideas, inspirations from other frameworks, but then you can use it to design something that's going to work for you. Like I'm a fan of simplicity. I've never seen a complex data governance framework work, mainly because people look at it and go, that is too complicated.
So
and
if it's
people,
like a 20-point framework, then often that's a little
Please.
complicated.
Cycles that go like this and this, it goes back and forth.
There was one client a few years ago who said, can I share my screen? Oh, yes, of course. And honestly, I have no idea how they fitted it on one screen. And I just went, you haven't shared this with anybody, have you? Because if I was there, even I would be going, whoa, we don't want to do that. That is too scary. So I'm a great fan of simplicity, because we can always add the detail. If I design a really nice framework and I meet you, Tim, and you go, oh, this is great. Yeah, it's going to work in my function. And I go to Juan and you go, well, yeah, that's great, Nicola, but we've got this instance. I can add a little nuance and say, yes, okay, Juan, in your area, we're going to do this little bit slightly differently, just so it allows that for you. But if I try to design that upfront for everybody, this is when we get this so complicated that you all say, no, we can't do this. We're really busy people with day jobs. We're not doing this. So I'm a great fan of that simple approach.
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. If you had to boil governance down to its core elements, like you're like the simplest methodology, what would that kind of look like to you?
So, because I say that a data governance framework, as far as I'm concerned, should have 3 things. This is the oversimplification, according to Nicola, but a data governance policy, because I've tried doing data governance without something mandating it. I'd rather be the good cop selling it, but there's only so far I can get with that. So I need an official policy in our organization that says we are doing data governance over the following data. So that is really, really valuable. We absolutely have to have some roles and responsibilities, because otherwise I find it's that you must have all been to the same meetings that I've been to, where we've all agreed that something's going to be done. Nobody's dissenting at all. We all go away going, oh, that was a productive meeting. That was great. And we come back next month and I go, so did you do the thing, Tim? And you go, oh, I thought Juan was doing it. And Juan goes, but I thought you were doing it, Nicola. And data governance is exactly like that. So we absolutely have to have clear roles and responsibilities. And then the other thing is processes, to make people do the same things in a consistent manner. And I missed that one out in the early days, because I just thought, that's all right, I can inspire you all to do the right things. And then Tim would fix a data quality issue that he's found, and he's really proud of himself because I've embraced data governance and I'm fixing this issue. And then Juan rings me up going, why is this data from Tim changed? And I'm going, oh, it's good, isn't it? He's fixed an issue. No, it made my system fall over because I didn't know about it. So we need processes to keep people doing the right things holistically across the whole organization. And I know that's a very simplified view, but I find that if you kind of tick those things off, you've got the basis for what you need.
Data governance policy, roles and responsibilities, and processes. I love it. And in my notes here, I call it the oversimplified methodology for governance. So OMG by Nicola.
I love it.
This is great. I inside of what you just described here, I'm going back to one of the things that you started off earlier when we said, like, oh, the therapy sessions, let's go talk to the people, like understand the problems. Like, where does that fit? Because I think I would argue that's a core thing, regardless of any framework, of any type of stuff. And I'll go out and push and say, like, this is something I think you should do that would work for every organization. Now, how you do it is a different thing, but it's like, got to go talk to the people to understand, have these conceptual, understand the business, how they see the world. How would you fit? First of all, do you agree that's something that can be done everywhere? And how would that fit?
Yeah, I think we need to unearth those, whichever technique or method we use to unearth them. We've got to do that. I want to do that as early as I possibly can, because the information that you find out during that information gathering is what will help me design a framework, or you design a framework that's going to work. And it's only by talking to you and understanding these challenges that I realize that my preferred simplified approach of data owners and data stewards isn't going to work. We're going to need two types of data owner, or two levels of data owner, because of something. And if I haven't had that fact finding, I'll design the wrong thing. And I also am a very firm believer of, if people feel they've co-created something, they're much more likely to be engaged and accept it, rather than me saying, well, I've talked to you all and here's your framework. It's much better if I say to you, so Tim, this sounds like this data is going to be really challenging. How do you think we ought to solve the data ownership, and how are we going to do this? And then Tim feels like, he might say, I've got no idea, Nicola, I've never done this before. But Tim now feels like I've listened to him and involved him. So I think that engagement piece needs to be started as early as you possibly can, and then continued all the way through.
This is what I'm organizing my thoughts here because of the role. I feel that there is a chicken and egg situation where you're like, oh, we need to kick this off, but the person who can actually kick this off, who can actually have these conversations, who is that networker, that connector, that bridge, like, does that person always exist in an organization? And if there doesn't, or maybe they do exist, we don't even know, like, or is that a point where we need to bring in somebody, a coach, a consultant, but they should not be doing that work. They should be tied to somebody else. So, like, I feel that sometimes, like, yeah, we should go figure out, we should go do talking, but who's actually good at that? Because not many people are good. And then that's how I feel like it doesn't start off with a bang.
I think you're right. And I think that I would say that somebody that's got good people skills is probably a stronger candidate for taking on that role than somebody that's really techie. You can learn enough. You don't have to be hugely techie to be a data governance lead. You can learn enough to be able to talk to your IT colleagues. You don't need to be able to code whatever the job adverts and things say, thankfully for me. So I think you'd be better off choosing somebody internally who gets it, that is very good at talking to people, as you say, and then training them up, or getting somebody in to help you. I've seen it work quite successfully where people have hired people in for the role when they have done it before. And actually that, I kind of say, oh, I'd rather you knew the organization and I can teach you data governance. But actually that does work as well, because if you're new to an organization, you need to go around and talk to loads of people and find out what the organization does. And you might as well do your pain point analysis and work out how you can help them while you're at it. So I've seen that work well as well. But I think if you're looking internally, sometimes it is technical people who realize that they enjoy the social people interaction more than that. Business analysts make good people because they go around and talk to lots of people. A lot of them have understood the value of data. They make good data governance people. And often operational risk, because again, they're used to going around talking to lots of people around the organization. So I always think it's people coming to data governance roles from so many different routes, which I always find is fascinating. And none of us, when we were kids, decided that when we wanted to grow up, we wanted to be a data governance manager. But, mainly because I'm too old for that even to have been a thing when I was a kid. But I think even if I heard of it, it probably wouldn't have been high on my list.
Look, I'll tell you that I love that quote because I came up a conversation a long time ago. I've met a lot of people, like, when we go to conferences and stuff, that they're like, hey, well, because they're listening to the podcast, and many people have listened to the podcast because the stories that you give is like, so I was told today that I need to do data governance. I didn't even know what data governance is. So I'm like looking for every stuff. I'm listening to podcasts and they find that. And then somebody came to me, is like, yeah, nobody was a kid saying, I'm going to be a data governance lead when I grow up, right? But at the same time, I think once we start talking about like the stuff of like, I'm trying to understand what you're trying to go do. Your problem is like just communicate. You're like, you see people frustrated and you're like, I can help you. I can actually take this pain away. Like that's good. That makes me feel good. I'm like, I do aspire to help people and take their pain away. So data governance is probably the way to do that.
Yeah, or anybody that likes sorting things out, a sense of order. Say I was a project manager and I thought up until that point I'd done the career the bank told me to do, and some bits were better than others up until that point. But when I got my first project manager role, I thought, aha, I found my thing, planning and sorting everything out and making it work. This is great. And then say, data governance happened by accident, but I realized that is that the same, except I don't just do a quick thing. I'm actually doing a long-term solving and helping people and sorting things out. So a number of people have I know have come from project management backgrounds like I have as well, who want to do that perhaps longer term helping people.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Yeah, I've seen quite a few folks come from either like business consulting or analyst backgrounds, as well as project management backgrounds, because I think it has a lot to do with this organization
Yeah.
aspect, and also wanting to meet with people, understand the needs, really prioritize effectively, and then drive organized change.
Yeah.
Anybody that's curious, I think, would be a good thing.
Oh, curious.
I think my husband says nosy, because I always go, oh, I've got a new client and they're in a new sector that I've not worked in before, and he goes, you're just dying to be nosy, aren't you, to find out how that organization works? Go, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I always say people, you want to go, you should follow the money, understand how that paycheck that you get, how does the money flow, and understand, because the money flows, it connects to so many departments, so many people, so much data around that. So I think that's always an important thing. I love how we ended up talking so much about like the people side of like, how do you get into this? Because hopefully people who are listening, they're like, well, what is this governance stuff like? Maybe they realize this is probably for me, or this is not for me too. So let's do our lightning round. So let's kick it off. First question: is AI changing the way we should think about data governance?
Ooh, so it's probably not changing how we think about it, but just making an even stronger case for it. And why now?
A stronger case, and why now? Great answer. Second lightning round question for you. I think a lot of folks struggle to kind of understand and ultimately implement data stewardship as kind of a concept. Do you see data stewardship as an important part of data governance?
Yes, definitely. Because I think the way I think about it, the data owners are the senior people who are accountable, but they're not going to do much of the doing. Let's face it, they're too senior. They probably either don't have the subject matter expertise, or they don't have the time and inclination. So they need the stewards to do the doing, to be the subject matter experts. So I think they're vital.
All right. So third one, I really like that the data governance and data management has really embraced this whole social technical phenomenon. I argue data mesh is a big part of what has pushed that concept. Do you see data mesh a lot, and do you think it has been like net helpful for data governance?
So not as much as I thought I would. I helped an organization, probably one of the very early adopters, and I got really excited about it, because up until that point, every time somebody says to me, we've got this new technology, or we're moving to the cloud, or how's data governance different, I go, it isn't different. It doesn't matter where your data is, what technology it's on, you still need data governance. And I think that is same true when it comes to data mesh. But I love the fact that data mesh isn't just about the technology, it's about the organizational change and perhaps the data democratization. So I got it was really rewarding working with that client to really work out how we're going to get data governance to work for data mesh. They'd not got data governance in place elsewhere, so they were doing data on data mesh first, but we wanted to do a data governance foundation that would work for everything else. And so that was really great fun, and working out how the roles need to evolve and how you need to change it. But I really thought that would be, I'd see more of it. I think from talking to other people, I think perhaps more of it's going on, but I don't know that it's given the label data mesh so much now. I think a lot of people are embracing data products. And perhaps they've just decided that explain to the business how we're federating the architecture and everything was just blowing their brains. And we'll just say, do you want this data product kind of thing? I think perhaps that's why the term's not used as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, that resonates. And I feel like lately more mentioned around data products and data product management, or data as a product, as opposed to data mesh, which maybe is has more pieces to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds techie, and I think that's the whole thing. We've got to make it accessible to business users.
Yeah, more accessible. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Final lightning round question for you is uh, around the term governance, right? So, folks are sometimes scared of this idea of governance or data governance, and we like to joke around, and perhaps it's sometimes true that it's a bit of a swear word in some circles, right? Do you see the term data governance fading and turning into things like data enablement or some of these sort of optimistic views or new views of kind of what governance is, or do you think that's a bit overstated? Governance is governance, whether you like the term or not. That's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, so I'd love to think that the term would go away, but I've been hoping that for 22 years now, and I think it's unlikely to if it hasn't now. I think enablement's a good word, and I've helped a number of clients who've decided to call their team that, but not that many in the overall scheme of things. I've seen a few call it data quality, because I'm a strong believer that the data quality activities should be done by the same team as whoever does data governance. And I think generally as a business user, I want good quality data. I'm not entirely sure I want data governance. So why not call the team data quality? And we'll do data governance as part of it, but it's just one of the activities we do to give you data quality. The only one I'm really anti, and unfortunately, my husband has told me never to play poker because I can't keep a straight face. I was at an event earlier in the year, and somebody was telling me that they just renamed their team Data Enablement. I'm going, oh, that's really cool. I've heard that work well for people. And somebody else in the group that we were talking in went, oh no, we aimed higher than that. We've named our team Data Excellence. At which point I'm trying to kind of keep a straight face, and he went, you don't like that, do you? And I went, no. I said, because this is going back to what we were talking about earlier. That's doing data governance for the sake of doing, we're going to do it for the sake of doing it well. Whereas actually we're not. We're doing data governance to deliver value. So enablement is a better word than, because excellence, that really sounds like I was in the early days. We're evangelizing, all our data will be perfect and we'll all live happily ever after. At which point I would be told less politely to leave people's offices and let them get on with their job. Not
I
worry
like
about your
the
little data thing.
I like the honest no BS here, and yeah. At first, when I heard you say the phrase "data excellence," my initial instinct, to be frank, was like, I mean, that's kind of interesting. It's a little inspirational. But then, as you think about it more, it's kind of like, well, it's a bit empty because isn't the point of data not data in and of itself? It's just a means towards the end. Data excellence should really be business excellence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's seeing your keyboard behind you is, I had Dr. Joe Perez on my podcast earlier in the year, and he's into music, as am I. And he was saying, if you think about data and music, which I thought was a wonderful analogy, and he was saying, when you look at sheet music, all those notes are individual pieces of data. But on their own, if you just go and hit a random key, it's not necessarily going to sound very nice. It's the pulling it all together to deliver something beautiful that's music that is actually the valuable thing. And so we need to do our data to do whatever it is we need to in our organization.
That's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah.
Well, that is a great segue to takeaways. Tim, take us away with takeaways. Kick us off.
Oh my goodness.
So much.
So many good takeaways. I'll do my best to be brief. So we started with the honest no BS question. Why is there so much talk about data governance and not enough doing? And you said that once explained, right, everyone agrees that we need to do data governance, right? That's often not the hard part. The hard part is really building momentum, because there's a huge people and culture element that you need to change and you need to motivate. People think that it's just about data, but it's much broader than that in terms of what you have to change and what you have to impact. And when we walk into the office and we see a hole in the wall, we don't just move a painting to cover it up, right? We need to actually solve the underlying problem. And so we started to get into what are some of the gaps that are really preventing people from taking action. One kind of category that you talked about was what you kind of mentioned is like the capability, right? You have to really actually focus on it. You can't just outsource data governance. Your company is the one that's best positioned to understand your challenges and what needs to happen. Sometimes that role just gets dumped on someone, which is not always easy for that individual or individuals. And so they have to build up their brand internally. They have to build up their knowledge to be able to start to address it, right? And you need to make sure that there's senior accountability. And you mentioned that actually empowered is probably a better term. And that's really, really important. Governance might be common sense to people, but the vast majority of people are just trying to get their jobs done. And so addressing culture is going to be really important. Otherwise, people are going to continue to do their jobs. They're going to, be tactical. They're going to do what they were trained to do. And you said that, technology doesn't have to be the central focus and shouldn't be the central focus. You could start doing data governance with a spreadsheet. It's really about the people. You need them to engage and start to do things. When someone says, you were doing this, but instead I want you to do this, that's kind of the change that you want to be able to motivate. And tools and tech can help if you're, at a larger scale or a larger organization, more complex, when you're trying to really automate and make things work at a larger scale. So I think there were a lot of good elements there. We started then also to go into how do you start, right? And you said, start by making the case for data governance. Even if the CEO says we need to do data governance, you have to tie it to the unique drivers within your organization. Lean on things like data quality horror stories, which I think is a really great tip for folks, right? Because it helps people to realize, like, why is this valuable? And you can talk about the statistics, you can talk about the impact that AI is having, and how governance is important, and blah 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 blah, right? But like ultimately, sometimes you just gotta give that example of, hey, remember that one time when we needed that dashboard for that board report, and then like 2 minutes before it was time, like it broke and all the terms had the wrong definitions. That sucked, right? Governance helps to solve that. That really makes it tangible for folks. So I really love that. Somebody should be taking lead around data governance. There needs to be focus, and go to conferences, listen to podcasts, read articles, learn from those who are doing it and the success stories and also the horror stories. So much more. But Juan, what were your big takeaways?
All right, so I'll start with the negative. What you should not do. Consultants should not be doing the data governance. You can't outsource that. What worked before in one organization may not work in another one. So don't just lift and shift that stuff. Copy and pasting the framework. There is no silver bullet around this. Doing data governance for regulations where you're like, I'm just doing the minimal work for checkboxes. That does not work, because regulators will change their mind. Do it properly, and you will address the regulators and also provide business value. Putting it on a short timeline, that does not work. And don't think about it as a project. We brought up the whole issue of a framework, and I like how you said, like, look, these frameworks are very theoretical. They haven't been kind of implemented in practice as is. You maybe use it as inspiration, but in case you've never done this, you really need to focus on the why you're doing the data governance. That design needs to work for you, and it needs to be simple. And to that, we got to the OMG, the oversimplified methodology for governance by Nicola, which is 3 parts. We discussed the data governance policy. Have an official policy that says, yes, we are doing governance on this particular set of data. Roles and responsibilities. Can't just agree that things need to be done. There needs to be an alignment and action. And you need to have processes. This needs to be done the right way. Don't just say, oh, we fixed it, but then how do people know it was fixed? How do they know it didn't impact something else? And then at the end, I think that extra part that we talked about is who is doing that information gathering, that therapy session, that conceptual modeling. That should occur everywhere. Who's doing this? Like these are folks who can come from different roots, right? They like to talk to the people. They're business analysts, operational risks, people who like to organize, categorize, sort, project management backgrounds, people who are curious. Okay, how did we do? Anything we missed?
Wow, we covered a lot, didn't we?
That was all you.
We did.
I think all 3 of us were talking about.
All right. Well, to wrap up, what's your advice about data life? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Gosh, right. What's my advice? I think it's a kind of stop talking about data governance and just start doing it now, and get people, and if necessary, use AI as the reason to get people talking about it, get them to understand that you can design the most wonderful LLM, but you put the wrong data in it or rubbish data, you're not going to get the results you were hoping. So I think that would be my advice for that. I think, what was the next one? Who else? Who should you invite? Have you had Susan Walsh on? She's great fun. or Dr. Joe Perez that I was talking about. They would both be very good, I'm sure. And what do I follow? There's so much stuff out there. I think Dharma as an organization I was on the Dharma UK board for 13 years, so I'm somewhat biased, but I do think Dharma is a good one. Join your local chapter, get along to events and meet people through that. I think that's very good. You don't have to join the one in your country. So Dharma UK does actually do quite a lot of good content and things on LinkedIn, so follow them anyway. I think Dataversity has always been really good. I've always liked their content. Conferences is a hard one. There are so many of them these days, but I would just make sure you get there and do that. I actually do run a free data governance networking group for people who work in data governance. Obviously, the people who run it are in the UK, but we try to do our events mainly virtually, and at times that people can come along and join. So I think it's just really, I think we find out more as data governance people by meeting other people and sharing our experiences and putting our heads together and kind of going, oh, now that's an interesting situation. And other people can say, oh, yeah, we came across that and we tried this. I think that's a really good way to really learn. And in my experience, most data governance people are really supportive, collaborative people. I had somebody come on one of my masterminds earlier in the year, was talking about data trust scales. I went, what's that? And he said, well, we did data quality dashboards and the business didn't understand it. So we've rebadged it and labeled it and it's all called data trust scales. And I went, oh, wow, that's amazing. And he kind of then was teaching the mastermind for me. And I'm actually going to do a masterclass. I invited him to come and do a masterclass for me because, he'd come across an approach that I hadn't. I don't have the monopoly on all the right answers. So I think that networking and sharing is so, so valuable when you're doing data governance.
That's great advice.
Nicola, thank you so much. We really this was a fantastic conversation, and I love how we left with so many practical things for everybody. And looking forward to hanging out with you next time we're in the